Welcome to today's explainer. Look, today is June 14, 2026, and we are witnessing what could literally be a monumental turning point between the United States and Iran. The Strait of Hormuz peace accord is actually scheduled to be signed today. We're talking about a massive step toward de-escalation, officially aimed at ending a conflict that has violently gripped the region for months. So let's unpack exactly what's inside this document, how on earth we got here, and what it really means for the rest of the world. But, before the ink on this thing is even dry, we've got to take a hard look at the reality on the ground. Is this conflict really over? Does a signed piece of paper actually just magically erase the deep-seated distrust that completely defines this super fragile relationship? Or are we just looking at a temporary pause in a much longer, way more complex geopolitical standoff? That's the big central mystery, the real tension we're going to explore right now. Okay, so here's our roadmap for the explainer today. First up, the historic peace accord. Then we'll hit the road to the deal, followed by two very different perspectives on the whole thing. And finally, we'll wrap up with the remaining hurdles. All right, jumping right into part one, the historic peace accord and the reopening of a global choke point. So the absolute primary focus of this entire agreement guarantees the immediate, unhindered reopening of the Strait of Hormuz for global shipping. And why does this matter so much to us? Well, because it's literally one of the world's most vital economic arteries. For months now, its closure or even just restriction has been this massive point of severe economic contention. It's been causing global markets to absolutely panic. Getting this major choke point unblocked is, quite frankly, a total necessity for keeping the global economy afloat. This reopening is that immediate, tangible win the world has been so desperately waiting for. Moving right along to part two, the road to the deal marked by chaos and leadership change. You might remember that tensions escalated wildly just a few months back in February 2026. We had Operation Epic Fury, which brought direct military exchanges involving Iran, the US, and Israel. It was incredibly tense. But compounding all of that chaos was a truly historic shift in Iranian leadership right after the passing of former Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. And honestly, this sudden political realignment just sort of blew open a surprise window for dialogue. It really paved this incredibly rapid, almost desperate road to the signing we're seeing today. Now, when two nations are actively shooting at each other, direct communication pretty much goes completely out the window. And that is exactly where Pakistan stepped up. Serving as the primary mediator, they played a totally pivotal role behind the scenes, bridging this huge communication gap between Washington and Tehran. Literally, without Pakistan acting as that vital bridge, the diplomatic channels that were needed to even get to today's signing, they just simply wouldn't have existed. All right, let's get into part three. Two very different perspectives on this, end versus framework. Because here is the wild part. Even as the diplomats are literally shaking hands, a major narrative twist is already unfolding. Depending entirely on who you ask, this document means completely different things. The U.S. administration, led by President Donald Trump, is really positioning this accord as a definitive end to hostilities, like a final, concrete resolution. But then, if you look at the new Iranian leadership, they are characterizing this exact same document as merely a negotiation framework. So you've got one side declaring they've crossed the finish line, while the other side is treating this like the starting block. Just listen to that specific phrasing again. An end to hostilities versus a negotiation framework. When the foundational understanding of a peace treaty is this drastically different on literally day one, it just highlights exactly how incredibly fragile this whole diplomatic effort truly is. Which brings us to part four, the remaining hurdles, which are basically active landmines. There are three huge, unresolved issues threatening the entire success of this peace. Number one, regional instability. Attacks originating from Lebanon toward Israel are still happening, which clearly shows that regional proxies are staying highly active entirely outside the bounds of this new accord. Number two, nuclear concerns. The U.S. has explicitly reserved the right to take future action regarding Iran's enriched uranium programs. That's a huge asterisk. And number three, and actually this might be the most surprising one, domestic dissent. Inside Iran right now, citizens are actively protesting against the potential compromises that their own new government had to make just to secure this deal. So between active proxies, enriched uranium, and major internal protests, there are literal landmines waiting just beneath the surface. So we have to circle right back to that core question. Is this true peace, or is it just a pause? Look, today is an absolutely massive diplomatic achievement, no doubt about it. But its long-term success depends entirely on how the US and Iran manage to navigate incredibly thorny issues of nuclear policy, active proxies, and intense domestic pressures in the coming months. It's a historic day for sure, but the hardest work is clearly just beginning. Thanks so much for joining me for today's explainer. Keep your eyes on the Strait, and I'll see you next time.